Welcome to my talk on clean sport. What is clean sport? And why should we care? The question sounds simple enough. If the answer was easy, I would of course not be speaking to you today. In this video, I'm going to show you how important it is to get that answer right. I will also guide you through a bespoke research project designed to answer the question from the athlete's point of view. I'm Andrea Petroczi, research professor at Kingston University London. I'm also a member of the Clean Sport Alliance, and I have a long-standing interest and involvement in researching doping behavior. Today, I will exclusively focus on what clean sport means to athletes involved in elite sport. The literature suggests that attributes linked to clean athlete identity are strong protective factors. There is as yet no clear and universal definition of this unexplored and desirable clean athlete identity. The question of what, if anything, anti-doping can do to foster this identity is even more difficult to answer. Scholars agree that doping is complex, and the same goes for the landscape of anti-doping rule violations. Simply mapping notions of clean sport and clean athlete identity onto the use of prohibited substances and methods may serve doping control strategies. But it is overly simplistic for developing education strategies. Taking this point into consideration, we designed a qualitative study to explore athletes' views on the clean sport concept. The study was part of the RESPECT project. RESPECT stands for Research Embedded Strategic Plan for Anti-Doping Education, a Clean Sport Alliance initiative for tackling doping. It is an Erasmus Plus collaborative partnership funded project. The aim of this study was to explore the meanings and importance of clean sport and clean athlete identity. Specifically, the current study set out to address the following research questions. How do elite athletes define clean sport and being a clean athlete? What are the challenges associated with clean sport and being a clean athlete? What can be done to ensure that sport is clean in the future? In this project, we employed a method called community-based participatory research, or CBPR for short. Simply put, it is an exclusive research approach which involves participants engaging in all steps of the research process, from formulating research questions to interpreting and sharing the results. Participants include end users, stakeholders, and other beneficiaries. Although CBPR is an established method, it had not yet been applied to anti-doping. We opted for this approach because we wanted the project to be community-driven. We wanted the research and any intervention strategies to be both relevant and culturally appropriate. Crucially, this kind of integrated collaboration ensures that results are formulated and disseminated in practically useful terms. The other unique feature of our application was the involvement of athletes as researchers. Within the CBPR framework, we first invited community partners to be involved in the RESPECT project. These were 5 anti-doping organizations from Germany, Ireland, the Netherlands, Slovenia, and the UK. In stages 2 and 3, we had meetings with the NADOs and other academic partners to discuss strengths and resources, set priorities, and establish the specific research questions that are relevant to clean sport concept. Next, NADO partners each recruited 1 athlete co-researcher from their own country. All athlete researchers were international competitors with a degree in psychology or a related field. They also had to feel comfortable leading focus group discussions. Athlete co-researchers participated in a 1-hour online training session run by one of the athlete researchers on how to run a focus group. They were also interviewed with the same set of questions we set for the group discussions. This way, we bracketed, so to speak, their opinion before the group discussions and allowed them to familiarize themselves with the questions. In stage 4, each NADO organized 2 or 3 focus groups with their athletes. These focus groups were moderated by their athlete co-researcher and conducted in their native language. Importantly, academic researchers were not present during the national focus groups. This way, athletes were able to discuss doping among themselves. A total of 12 focus groups were conducted with 77 athletes, which is an impressively large sample for a study of this kind. On average, each focus group lasted approximately 1 hour. In stage 5, we arranged an international focus group with the athlete co-researcher and 1 athlete participant from each country. The meeting took place in London in 2019 during the first Clean Sport Forum behind closed doors. The discussion was conducted in English and reflected on the preliminary results. This focus group was led jointly by an athlete and an academic researcher. It lasted about 2.5 hours with a break. All discussions were recorded and transcribed for analysis. Finally, we discussed the findings and formulated recommendations together with the practitioners and athletes. In total, 82 athletes participated. They were from 5 European countries: Germany, Ireland, the Netherlands, Slovenia, and the United Kingdom. Participants represented 38 different sports, and most were active competitive athletes at the time of the data collection. 49 had taken part in either the Olympics, the Paralympics, or major sport events. 21 had won medals at the Olympics, the World Championships, or the European Championships. The focus group discussions produced almost 500 pages of text as research data. Focusing on our initial research questions, thematic analysis of the focus group data resulted in 4 overarching themes. The first 2 relate to the athletes as a person. First of all, clean means being true to the self. An athlete's sense of self as clean is something that is felt deeply as a person and as an athlete. Hence, clean is about being true to the self in terms of values and morals. Secondly, clean performance enhancement has multiple meanings. There are multiple interpretations of what constitutes clean performance enhancement. As a result, there are differences between athletes within the clean spectrum about what non-prohibited performance-enhancing substance, method, or behavior is regarded as clean, from a personal point of view. The next 2 relate to the athlete environment. We label the third theme as clean is not a solo act. Being a clean athlete has an interpersonal quality to it. It is something that is influenced by others on a daily basis. In the fourth theme, athletes reflected upon the challenges of and prospects for building a clean sport environment. Both problems and solutions in anti-doping are systemic captures the view that sport organizations and sometimes those responsible for anti-doping operate in ways that follow localized interests. This runs counter to the search of clean sport at the global level. To make progress, change at the systemic level is both needed and wanted. If we look at these themes a little more closely and break them into sub-themes, this is what emerges. If we take the first theme, identity, or being true to oneself, we have 2 sub-themes. The first suggests that clean values and morals have been there from the beginning, emphasizing the importance of upbringing. This is when athletes learn to value fairness, equality, and honesty, and to condemn cheating. The second associates being clean with valuing the process and experience of sport. Here, clean athletes are not exclusively focused on or motivated by winning, but value the quality of the process and experience in sport. They demonstrate this by celebrating and focusing on the individual journey and seeing doped performance as inferior. The clean athlete identity is a social enterprise which needs to be reflected in anti-doping initiatives. Clean athlete identity is rooted in early life experiences created by others, family, teachers, coaches, who promote equality, fairness, honesty, and rule following. Clean athlete identity is also characterized by continued commitment to these values and morals, and it is influenced by others on a daily basis. Therefore, anti-doping efforts need to target the interpersonal environment at various points in athlete's lifespan to help him or her become and stay clean. The second theme is about clean behavior. Its sub-themes reflects the fluidity of how clean performance enhancement is defined. When it comes to behavior, clean has multiple meanings. The first theme suggests a simple definition of following the WADA code. A clean athlete is cognizant of the WADA code and responsible and proactive to ensure that he or she does not break the rules. Yet, athletes vary in their beliefs about how inclusive or conservative they need to be with respect to their willingness to engage in performance-enhancing behaviors, all within the rich landscape of non-prohibited substances and methods. Secondly, personal boundaries play an important role. An athlete's appraisal of whether a given performance-enhancing substance or method is clean is highly personal and complex. On the one hand, athletes consider the nature and administration of a substance, as well as the negative and positive impact it has on their health. On the other hand, they also rely on their gut feeling, an instinctive and implicit way to decide if a substance or method is clean. Athletes who identify as clean understand the meaning of clean performance enhancement in a variety of ways. The only solid reference point is the WADA code, and whether you are on the right or the wrong side of the hard line set by the code. In this sense, clean sport is not drug-free sport. It is better defined as cheating-free sport, with doping representing one form of cheating. The third theme concerns the athlete's environment, suggesting that being clean is not a solo act, with the following sub-themes. An athlete's ability to be clean is influenced by how prevalent they think clean athletes are. A clean athlete is typically someone who perceives clean as the norm. They believe that most athletes they personally know, interact with, train alongside, or have competed against are clean. By contrast, athletes suggest that perceiving dopers as being in the majority is the key to athletes engaging with banned performance-enhancing substances and methods. In other words, clean is not only a behavior, but also a lens through which the prevalence data are viewed. A variety of interactions between an athlete and other individuals can inadvertently or directly lead the athlete to accidentally or purposefully dope. These interactions include conversations that create a sense of external pressure to achieve, acts of trust between the athlete and support personnel, and verbal advice about doping and anti-doping. There is this belief that doping will ever be eradicated. The perceived disparity within the anti-doping system undermines athletes' confidence in the ability and capacity of the current system to ensure a clean sport environment. They do value the effort, but they are skeptical about the future. The fourth and final theme focuses on the anti-doping system specifically and observes that both the problems and solutions are systemic. This breaks into the following sub-themes. First of all, athletes value clean sport, but they think it's an unachievable ideal. Eradicating doping was considered the key to clean sport, but participants recognized the action needed to eradicate doping was impossible to implement. This is partly because testing and detection always lag behind doping, and partly because eradicating doping may not be in the interest of some countries or organizations, which leads to the next sub-theme, the perceived disparity in the anti-doping system. Disparity is experienced in terms of anti-doping education, anti-doping controls and authorization, and the consequences for breaking the WADA code. It is a signal that clean sport is not a universal priority, and that the anti-doping system lacks fairness and equality. Finally, athletes felt that doping was not risky enough, and this needs to change. In their eyes, the system has failed to make doping risky for all. To increase the perceived risk, action needs to be taken to improve the quality of anti-doping education and support, to independently enforce and monitor procedures and authorizations for anti-doping controls, and to make punishment for doping harsher, equal for all, and more transparent. Athletes want anti-doping initiatives to do more to support them in being clean. They feel that being non-problematic, they are neglected and taken for granted. They explicitly ask for support for complying with doping control requirements. They also want greater transparency, and they want a system in place that manages the loss they suffer as a result of others' doping. Putting the themes together, we now see that clean sport is a rather complex notion with multiple interacting segments. As a result, the definition of clean athlete needs to be holistic to capture the essence of being clean as a state of balance that the athlete has established between, on the one hand, their inner self, which is shaped by values, morals, perceived duties and obligations, and on the other, their social and physical environment. To answer the research questions that we collectively set, we focused first on clean sport and identity, as seen from the athlete's point of view. But athletes' direct and vicarious experiences with doping and how that affects them interlaced all key themes. The impact of doping on clean athletes is multidimensional and goes beyond the obvious bitterness they feel when they are being cheated out of medals, sponsorship deals, and a better life. Let's hear from our athlete researcher, Andy Hayes, on how doping affects clean athletes.
Thank you, Andrea. So there's a perception from athletes that catching cheats and catching dopers, it takes too long. When cheats are caught, the retrospective redistribution of medals is an absolute must. However, as much as those medals are valued, there's a pain, there's those stolen moments attached to those. The lack of finishing in the top three, the lack of that jubilation of standing on the podium. The direct impact of doping and anti-doping is a constant in athletes' lives. There's almost an education-induced anxiety about accidentally taking something that might trigger a positive test. And then there's the extra vigilance that needs to become part of daily lives for the athletes that are put on whereabouts. However, that decision to be a clean athlete is a natural one for most people. And despite that, there's still that pressure to ensure that you do things in the right way. This has led to athletes are sort of reluctant to use medications. They're reluctant to use the TUE system because of the associations that the public might draw. I could draw many parallels with some quite high profile cases. But then athletes are also impacted from doping in an indirect way. There's fatigue with the same anti-doping education, the cynicism that we have from the media or the public about how clean their sport is. And then there's that reluctance and sometimes almost a fear of speaking out publicly against dopers and doping. When the athlete's belief that doping is all around and it can lead to altered goals and motivations, there's that feeling of being disheartened about what you can achieve in sport. Doping sets these false reference points. It impacts on the athletes, the knowledge, their belief about what they can achieve in their own sport. And it's led to training methods and training loads calibrated according to dope performance benchmarks. And from my personal experience, I've seen this leading to overtraining, from injuries to frustration to self-doubt, and it's essentially ended careers. When an athlete believes that doping is rife, it also casts doubt on the good performances. When an athlete performs at such a certain level and they're viewed with suspicion, they often feel powerless to avoid the accusations, to avoid the rumours. Even myself, I've always viewed sport with an underlying sense of cynicism with these extraordinary performances. I don't genuinely believe in miracles. For many, clean sport is a desirable but unattainable ideal. And for an athlete that wants to stay clean and to stay true to their values and to stay true to their morals, there has to be a degree of coexistence with doping in sport. The athletes know they'll never likely compete in a 100% clean sport environment, and they have to find ways of dealing with this. So athletes that identify as clean, they feel uncomfortable sharing the physical space with known dopers, and they make a conscious effort to remove themselves both physically, mentally, and even emotionally. This self-imposed cocoon is, of course, challenged if an athlete identifies as clean turns out to be otherwise. Finally, doping really is experienced as an act against the sport that we all love.
We are still working on the formal analysis of the issues Andy highlighted. The following theme seems to appear from the experiences athletes shared in the focus groups. Clean athletes live in a state of constant anxiety about accidentally making a mistake that might be construed as doping. They are tired of constantly hearing about doping and being suspected of something that they don't do. Lost opportunities may not apply directly to all, but altered personal goals about what they feel achievable in a good way is present in all clean athletes' lives. Doping is something that they have to live with. They have to accept that they are powerless to change their environment and find the balance between their aspirations, core values, and their environment. Being a clean athlete is a balancing act. So, to conclude my talk, there are points I would like to emphasize. Despite its awkward name, the community-based participatory research approach involving stakeholders working together was both straightforward and productive. The core principles of CBPR make it a good method for connecting academics and researchers. The project now offers a tried and tested model for athlete involvement. 5 years ago, I was struck by something Jade Johnson said to me. She thought that we, the researchers, could not possibly have the same understanding as the athletes. It has been my ambition to put this right ever since. Looking at the richness of the data we generated in this project, I have to say that she had a very important point. Involving athletes at every step of the research project, working with them as partners and not just participants, has greatly benefited the project. It has also been a very enjoyable experience. Looking at the impact, several things stand out. Feedback from the athletes and the data both suggest that athletes also benefited from the process and that they enjoyed it. More often than not, This was the first opportunity that they had to discuss doping with athletes from other sports and from other countries in a safe and non-judgmental environment. As for the impact on stakeholders, the study offers a tried and tested guidance on how academics and stakeholders can work together to generate solid research data that are both relevant and useful. The process generated robust results. They confirmed that clean athlete and a clean sport are multidimensional concepts. The implications for anti-doping are clear. One size definitely does not fit all. I agree with athletes that achieving 100% clean sport, in other words, eradicating doping, is an unrealistic goal. Hopefully, collectively, we can reach a consensus about what clean enough sport should look like. Forgive me for being topical. If you think of doping as a virus, we know that many have not yet been eradicated, but they have been suppressed enough to cause no significant further harm. Let's say we accept this position as a pragmatic solution. If that is the case, then we have to look at the anti-doping system and decide what combination of measures need to be in place to make sport clean enough, and acknowledge that clean athletes coexist with doping. It does affect them. It's only fair that they are supported in dealing with both the demands of anti-doping control and testing, and with the mental and financial consequences of others around them doping. Allow me to close with the words of one of our athlete researchers. I couldn't have said it better myself.
You have to accept that there is always going to be some grey zone there, and we're going to have to accept that there are always going to be things that will be worthy of comment. But in the end of the day, if you get the grey zone quite narrow, then you've 95% of the job done. And sometimes, you have to celebrate that rather than worry about the last 5%.
Efforts to ensure a fair sport environment for all athletes have come a long way from doping control and testing to education and promoting clean sport behavior. More work needs to be done to get to the point where doping is seen in the broader context of sport integrity. But I wholeheartedly agree with Patrick. We should celebrate progress. And the new balance has to be found between, on the one hand, catching the cheats, and on the other, supporting those who are committed to being clean. Thank you for listening to my talk. I could not have carried out this study without the help of colleagues, funding from the European Union, and of course, the athletes. If you have any questions about this project, would like to design a similar project, or just want to give us feedback, please get in touch by email or through the project website. We would love to hear from you.